Well, we're here today talking with Peter Miller, who's known as the literary lion of books and movies. And he's here to talk to us about what he sees is happening in the industry and maybe give us a glimpse of what he thinks will happen in the future. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Doris. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast.
You're welcome. Peter, what are some of the, let's start out by talking about your own career. How many books and movies have you been involved in?
Well, we don't have a couple days to talk about that. So I became a literary agent in the fall of 1972. And I founded a literary agency with a man that I had met who was producing a Broadway musical called Zing. And I was producing an off-Broadway musical called Olio. And there was a song in this musical that I was producing, which went something like this. No one loves an agent but his mother, his mother. No one loves an agent but his mother. Well, I didn't take the advice of that song. And this man that I met, Al Zuckerman, who was a published author and a Broadway producer, we founded a literary agency called the Writer's House. And we had an office that was so small that you had to go outside of the office to change your sport coat. It was on the corner of 42nd and 8th Avenue. And Al and I started this agency, Writer's House, and in no time we sold 60 books. I remember our biggest deal back then was we got a $250,000 advance for a book in 1973. And Al and I had a little bit of a difference of opinion. He was about 20 years my senior. And he said, kid, you belong in Hollywood. So we split up. I was resentful of Al because I worked there for 2 years and we were partners, and he paid me $3,750 to go away. And I loved being a literary agent. Back then, times were different. Publishers threw parties for every book that was being published. And I would go to these parties being the handsome young man that I was. And I was never shy about talking. I guess most people would call it a gift to gab. And I would find clients, and Al and I would talk about them in our tiny office, which we paid $60 a month for. And then we graduated. We had a bigger office, which we paid $125 a month for. And then Al and I split up, and I went off on my own and formed the Peter Miller Agency. And I've never looked back. So to answer your question, we're still counting the books that I've sold in my career. We do keep accurate records. I think it's someplace around 1,500 books. And that includes books that we've sold around the world, because in many instances, I've kept the foreign rights to authors that I represent. And some of our clients, like my most famous client at the moment is Sir Ken Robinson. He's written 2 New York Times bestsellers. His TED speech is viewed more than any other TED speech. And I've licensed his books in 34 countries. So we've now sold 6 books, so you can do the math there. Nancy Taylor Rosenberg, who was a very successful client of mine, who wrote 6 New York Times bestsellers, she was licensed in 28 countries. So the volume of deals that I've made in the book industry is substantial. I've made many people millions of dollars. And in the motion picture, television, and cable industries, I've done several hundred motion picture and television deals. I think to date, we've had 23 movies produced based on properties that I was involved with. 3 of them have been nominated for Emmy Awards. The first was Miss 4th of July Goodbye, which was a Disney Channel movie. It was nominated for 4 Emmys. The second was called A Gift of Love, which starred Debbie Reynolds. It was based on a true story, and that was for Showtime. And the third one was called Helter Skelter, the remake, which was for Warner Brothers Television and CBS Films. the author of Helter Skelter, or the co-author, Vincent Bugliosi, who's now deceased, I represented for 34 years. So at the moment, we still have many motion picture and television projects in development. And the latest movie deal we're involved with is a remake of Rin Tin Tin, which I've been working on for 2 years. And it's going to be a big, big dog movie. I love dog stories. Right now I'm involved with several Christmas movies. But during this pandemic that we're experiencing now, there are no movies in production. So that's it, books and movies, and I do a lot of global marketing.
Right. And I was going to say, you've changed the name PMA Literary and Film to Global Lion Intellectual Property Management. And I assume that that reflects sort of a change in some of the things that you're doing now, or an enlargement.
Well, my original company was called the Peter Miller Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became the Peter Miller Agency Incorporated. And then it became PMA Literary and Film Management Incorporated in 1992, because I started producing movies and making deals wherein if I would develop a property, I would be involved in its metamorphosis into a film, television, or cable property. And that company still exists, PMA Literary and Film Management Incorporated. And then I formed a company called 21st Century Lion, and that was in 2000. And I was threatened with a major lawsuit from 20th Century Fox, and they said that they own the global brand 20th Century Fox, and that I was infringing on a multi-billion-dollar global brand. And I thought it was ridiculous. My father-in-law at the time was a lawyer in Fort Worth, Texas, actually a fairly well-known lawyer, the great B.L. Dean, taught me many lessons. When I told him I was forming a company called 21st Century Lion Incorporated, he said, "They're going to sue you." I said, "What are they going to sue me for?" He said, "You're infringing." I said, 21st Century Lion, it's not a fox, and it's the 21st century. And lo and behold, he was right. And I got Fox to pay me $5,000 to change the name. They paid me to change the name to what was called Millennium Lion. So I opened Millennium Lion, which is my loan out corporation, as a film producer. And lo and behold, a couple of other companies popped up as Millennium Lion. So then I ultimately changed my name to Global Lion Intellectual Property Management Incorporated, because I am a global lion.
I was going to say, I think that fits. I think that fits.
Well, the lion symbol is part of my life. My mother's maiden name was Lyons, Lyons. I'm a quintuple Leo. I was born on August 15th. And my mother had given me a couple little lion dolls, stuffed animals as a kid. And when she moved to Florida after my father passed away in 1976 or 77, I purchased a lion. Charlie, would you hand me that black lion? I'll show it to you, which was my first lion acquisition in Florida. And in my home right now where I'm living, there's over 450 lion images. But this is the first lion that I purchased at the West Palm Beach. It's very heavy, by the way. West Palm Beach Antique Fair. So
Yeah.
Being that I'm in the literary management business, I love the moniker of Literary Lion.
Right. It's great. What are some of the changes that you see will happen in the publishing in the book industry as well as the film industry as a result of COVID-19?
Well, there are major changes. For example, I've done a lot of business with Random House over the years, and selling a new book right now, it must be major. I mean, one of our projects that we're involved with, we're trying to package with a major celebrity. And so what's happened is the big companies are only buying big projects. So it really affects the mid list. And they want people that have brands or substantial communities following them, a big blog fan base. And the digital book sales have gone up tremendously because as a result of COVID-19, because a lot of people don't really want to have packages delivered to their house for fear that somebody sneezed on them. So a digital file, it's easy. I don't know how many 100 million e-readers there are in existence. There used to be several, but primarily they're the Kindle 2, and iPad. And I read everything on an iPad. It's affected the film industry because, as you know, most movie theaters are closed. I have a widescreen television in my home. A drop-down overhead projector. So when I'm sitting in my living room, I'm watching a movie. It's not on a small screen. And I probably watch a movie every day. Last night I watched 2 movies. Streaming has taken over the world. I mean, Netflix stock, which was the highest, most successful stock in the world, I think 3 years ago, it's just gone crazy. They're spending $19 billion in programming this year. Of course, that's probably changed because they haven't been in production for several months. But I'm just doing a deal now with Netflix, as you may know, on the book The Ultimate Evil. That's going to be a 4-part docuseries that'll come out probably in the spring, summer of 2021. And they're king of the streaming world. But of course, everybody else is getting in that business right now, including Disney with Disney Plus, and Peacock, which is the Universal brand with NBC, which is owned by Comcast.
And Amazon?
So we're in
is
a changing world. Technology is king.
Yeah, yeah. And how does that affect the author? What must the author do differently or more of as a result of all these changes?
Well,
You talk about, you say that authors today are really in media warfare.
well, you know, I'm old school, having been in this business for longer than 48 years, going on, I guess, 49 years this fall. It used to be, there was a saying in New York that went like this: a good book is a good book is a good book. And then I'll always remember the New Yorker cartoon, Upper East Side bookstore in New York City. And the books are displayed in the front window of the bookstore. And the sign next to the pile of this particular book is, "This is a great book. It will never be a motion picture." Because the literati really are more interested in the power of the words and not the images. But I'm interested in books that have movie potential, and to champion the publication of a book and then appreciate its metamorphosis into a film. It's a beautiful experience. What author wouldn't want to do that? Of course, authors get very upset with the adaptations of their books into movies. But this business that we're in of books and films is changing. Everything has become the nano digital delivery of content in milliseconds. So you can watch a movie on your iPhone, your iPad, your computer. These are, you know, you can put it on a stick drive, and you know, now on your iPad you can have hundreds of books. You don't, when you travel on an airplane, you don't want to take a suitcase filled with pounds and pounds of hardcover books.
What do you have some advice for writers
Yes.
help them build a brand?
Yes. If you I want to give you my website because I wrote an article. I don't know whether I shared it with you, called Promote, Promote, Promote. And
Yes.
what I was about to say is the old school is a good book, is a good book, is a good book. And the publisher did all the marketing and promotion. Now, what publishers expect is authors need to come to them with a brand. So in order to be recognized in the publishing world today, not only do you have to write a good book, a good book, a good book, a great book, a book that's stellar, that's perfect, perfectly edited, and stands out, but it's important that you have a brand. And that brand consists of a website, a blog, accolades from famous people, endorsements. If it's a nonfiction book, an introduction, preface, forward, or prologue by somebody famous, an epilogue, an afterword, and podcasts. Sometimes book trailers are really good. Anything you need to build your brand is necessary. Um, because what happens is, if, let's say you wrote a book, Doris, and I was your representative, and I submitted it to Simon and Schuster. Well, Simon and Schuster has an editorial board meeting every week. And sitting around that table is the publisher, the editor-in-chief, the senior editor, the executive editor, the editor at large, the editors, the public relations department, the marketing department. They're all talking, and all of a sudden somebody says, well, I just read Doris Booth's new novel and I loved it. And they said, oh, great. Did anybody else read it? And then two other editors raised their hand and said, I read Doris's book. She's a brilliant writer. And then the editor-in-chief might say, well, who is Doris Booth? What kind of traffic does she have on her website? How many people are paying attention to her blog? Have people endorsed her book? Has she had any television appearances? Has she had any radio appearances? Does she do podcasts? Is she going to buy any finished copies of the book? It's everything that could be imaginable to promote the author is necessary to convince the publisher that they should invest in Doris Booth's novel. So media and promotion, marketing is very important, and some authors loathe it. They don't want to have anything to do with social media. They don't want to blog. They don't want to do podcasts. They just want to write their books and have the books sell because they're great books.
When you're, that's true. When you're looking for a client, or when you're looking at a project, what sort of projects do you want to see more of or less of? I'm sure you get thousands of queries all the time.
Well, it's amazing how much stuff is still offered to us from all around the globe. I used to be in the true crime world when I represented Vincent Bugliosi, who I represented for 34 years. I think I've sold over 90 true crime books in my career. And I'm not interested in crime anymore. I've done it enough. I've produced true crime movies, true crime audios, true crime books, television movies. And I'm more interested in transformation, spirituality, mind, body, spirit, adventure, love stories. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. I mentioned my client, Sir Ken Robinson, earlier. He's a world-renowned, game-changing educator. And it's funny, he has been tardy in delivering his 6th book that I represent, which is going to be called Boundless. And originally it was called a Manifesto. And he was late delivering it, and it was about the future of education in the world. Well, that whole paradigm of education has completely changed as a result of the pandemic. My daughter, who's actually with me now, both my daughters are with me now, but my youngest daughter is in graduate school, and she's a stellar student, as was her big sister, but her whole career as a student is a Zoom call. And she works very hard. She can't be interrupted when she's doing her Zoom call. She does her studies. Her last report card was 2 A pluses and 2 A's. So she's doing a great job, but it's all online. So online education has become the new norm.
Yeah, it's kind of depressing. But another note, what sort of words of encouragement would you have for writers trying to write into this market today, or film or books?
It's funny. I wrote an article many years ago. It was called Writers Write On. It was a double entendre. Don't give up. Believe in what you're doing. The world is changing. One of my favorite sayings in a book that I'm going to send you when I get your physical address is, every obstacle is an opportunity for a solution. I believe that books are going to get shorter, although many people, like John Bolton's new book is 500 pages. I'm not going to support that book, but I don't know who would read 500 pages, but a lot of fiction, I think, is going to be shorter because of people's brains are changing. As a result of technology, people have a shorter attention span, unless they're seasoned readers. And seasoned readers like to, was it James Clavell used to write epic tomes, like Hawaii, what was it, 900 pages or something like that. My words of encouragement to authors is not to give up, to embrace the fact that we have a technological world and they should figure out how they could brand themselves. So having a community, having a fan base, having a following is part of the new norm in publishing. And sadly, the competition is fierce. So how do you stand out in a world that's so crowded? I mean, I don't know how many books we published a year now. When I used to use this fact, I used to say 200,000 books a year. And that was based on not only original hardcover books, but reprints and trade paperback and mass market. Well, essentially, the mass market business really doesn't exist anymore. If you think about the mass market paperback book, when you would go to a supermarket and every week they'd have a new array of books. My client, Nancy Taylor Rosenberg, the late Nancy Taylor Rosenberg, her first book, Mitigating Circumstances, she was from Dallas, by the way. First printing was 1.3 million copies in paperback. That's an enormous, and they were all sold in supermarkets.
Yeah.
They used to say the average life of a paperback book is the same the life of a banana. Because if it didn't sell in a week on the shelf of the supermarket, they'd replace it. And unfortunately, they would rip the cover off and return the cover for the refund because books are sold on consignment. It's not a final sale. That's a flaw in the book industry, but that's the way it works.
Yeah. There are many flaws, but I'm hoping that there will be some positive upside to this whole thing. As a matter of fact, one of your quotes that I really love is that you say that there's more room at the top than there is at the bottom.
Well, I attribute that quote to the late, great Christopher Cook Gilmore. His father, Eddie Gilmore, won the Pulitzer Prize in 1948 for his interview with Joseph Stalin. Eddie Gilmore was an AP reporter, and there was a movie made about Eddie called Never Let Me Go that starred Clark Gable, because he was responsible for smuggling his Russian bride out of Russia. And that's what the movie was about, Never Let Me Go. I think it was MGM. That means that as a deal maker, which is what I am, if I love Doris Booth's novel, and we are involved, we're in a very interesting quagmire with a book that I want to represent, which is extremely literary. And so there's more room at the top than there is at the bottom, means I've got to find the most important literary editors in the US book publishing business. I used to know Sonny Mehta. You know who Sonny Mehta was? They used to call him God in the
Yes.
He was at the helm at Knopf. He
Yes.
began at Penguin, and then of course Penguin is owned by Random House now. Knopf is probably still the most prestigious literary imprint in the publishing world. So when you think about literary publishers, you think about Knopf, you think about Viking, you think about Pantheon, which is another division of Random House. If you remember, do you remember Confederacy of the Dunces? It was an enormously successful book, and it ultimately became a movie. So in this particular book, my job is to find the top literary editors, W.W. Norton, and to figure out how I can get a reader to want to read literary fiction that's very thick with literary words, the overuse of language in some instances. Like, I guess it could be labeled as purple prose, but it's a book that I'm enamored with. And I need to go to the top people. As a literary representative, as a literary manager, also as a producer, I always try and get to the most important people that I can deal with. And unfortunately, if I call Gina Centrillo, the president of Random House for many years, she's going to refer me to one of her editors. Or if I go to Judith Kerr, who's the head of HarperCollins. You know Judith?
Yes.
These are publishing institutions. I mean, Judith became world famous because she published The Secret many years ago, which sold 12 million copies in hardcover. They're huge. So I always try to go to a top editor that I know to try and work with them on who the right editor would be.
Right.
For example, Sally Richardson has been the publisher of St. Martin's Press forever. I love her. I knew her husband, who used to be the editor-in-chief of Doubleday. So I'm not a spring chicken, but I still like to use the adage, there's more room at the top than is at the bottom.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Peter Miller.
It's my pleasure, Doris.